If you think life is tough inside a maximum security prison, there are places in this country of even more extreme punishment. The nation's supermax prisons hold most inmates in solitary confinement in 8x10 cells, 23 hours a day, often for years at a time.
There are over 40 such facilities operating across the country, and the new HBO documentary Solitary goes inside one of them, the Red Onion State Prison in Southwest Virginia.
The main thing that segregation means to me is extreme loneliness and boredom. That's the main thing, loneliness. You know, don't care how tough you are. I don't care how badass you are. You can Bruce Lee it up all day long. It gets to you, and it hurts like hell.
Kristi Jacobson is Solitary's director and producer. Kristi, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you describe these basic conditions? I mean, when they say solitary, they mean it.
So yeah, I mean, well, solitary confinement or isolation or segregation, as it's sometimes called inside prisons, is when an inmate is locked in a cell with steel doors and a tiny window for 22, 23, or 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. And the windows are frosted over. You can't look outside of them. One inmate says at one point, what happens to someone's mind when you lock a person away in a bathroom for 10 years?
Yeah.
These are people whose mental states seem to deteriorate when they're in solitary for such prolonged periods of time.
Absolutely. It seems that they begin to lose touch with reality because they're so deprived of human contact. Even the meals come through a slot in the door.
So, first of all, no one's ever shot in a prison like this before. How did you find the inmates to start with?
I got into the prison through asking the director of the Department of Corrections at the right moment to try and understand what they were doing inside that prison, which was an effort to reduce the number of inmates that were held in solitary confinement. Mm-hmm. And so they instituted a program, and through that program, some inmates were now in small group settings. So I was able to meet some inmates in group settings. Others, for example, Michael, who you meet in the film, he was in the infirmary when we were filming in the infirmary, and so I was able to talk to him because the window in the infirmary is a little bit bigger, and you can actually have a conversation with someone in there.
Kristi, a lot of people say, well, these guys are the worst of the worst. They belong in these kind of conditions. But what kind of criminals are we talking about?
You have a range of criminals in a place like Red Onion. You've got people who have tried to slit the throat of a warden, so pose a real threat to other inmates and or staff. You've got some people who may have tried to escape, but you also have a lot of people who maybe disregarded an order, who are sent to segregation or solitary for multiple disciplinary infractions, which often means people with mental illness who just aren't able to function in the main prison population. So this is true across the country. I'm not talking specifically about Red Onion, but broadly. You know, we think of it as the worst of the worst, but in fact, it is human beings who are inside of our prisons.
You talked about what it does to the inmates. What does it do to the guards?
You know, one of the things that was most, I guess, surprising for me in making this film was beginning to understand how it must affect the guards and how that story is also one that needs to be told. It's an incredibly loud environment in which everybody behind those cell doors is in pain and is craving something that no guard can give them. It's against the rules. It's a really tough environment, and I think what ends up happening is, I knew even for myself, is you start to sort of get a little desensitized, and over time that really takes a toll on people who work there.
It is an extraordinary documentary about an extraordinary form of punishment in the United States. Kristi Jacobson, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Solitary inside Red Onion State Prison premieres Monday night on HBO.